All right, let's move on. Now, the second function of cue points is to locate these naturally high reward and low risk areas. Sometimes you will have these massive supply demand zones that you kind of want to trade. Like, you can see that things are happening and you're about to like position yourself, but just to place a stop loss and then an entry based on that usual idea of supply and demand, you would need like a humongous stop loss, which is, it's not practical, it's not consistent, and you generally don't want to do that. So for example, here's a daily consolidating pattern that happened at a weekly supply area. But this pattern would take you like 220 pips of stop loss to use because it's such a huge range. You can see the consolidation, you know that it's going to go the other way, but you know the stop loss required is too much. You know the direction, you don't have the entry. But if you look at this, this new move from low to high, which then creates the consolidating pattern, and then it also, by doing this move, it also falls below that 50% retracement, you then get a creation of a daily cue point. And this vastly reduces the stop loss, but by finding that quarterly high area. So instead of entering at the bottom of the consolidation, which would have been somewhere here, you wait until the price touches the newly formed Q high and position yourself accordingly. Another use of cue points is when you have a daily cue point already done and dusted, but then you notice that the supply demand zone is either the very top or the very bottom of the swing. So that's not ideal either. Like in this example, the actual supply is all the way up here. Okay, it's very, very deep into the whole move. And yes, sometimes the price may go all the way up here, kind of poke into it and quickly pick up some orders. But I found that in many of these cases, the cue point itself is just as reactive. So in this case, you know, if you don't know about cue points, you actually would have missed this entire move down. So as a traditional supply demand trader, you would have your limit order waiting up here, and you know it would never have triggered. But actually the price consolidated at my cue point and off it went. And I see this quite frequently. You know, it usually means that there's an even higher time frame area, such as maybe a conterminous line from a weekly or a monthly chart, that most people, you know, they don't even realize it exists. And when something like this starts to happen, you know, they're like baffled and confused. They're saying, oh, why is the price reacting there? And then they kind of attribute that to some like wizardry of central banks, when in reality, if I kind of mark this area with a red line, you can see that. So let's switch to the weekly chart and then see where this move is. And there it is. It's a nearby weekly supply and a conterminous line right around the area where that move happened. So this means that the entire cue point area that I marked from the daily chart was already touching that supply on the weekly. Funny that. Now I'm going to go through some examples for you so that you kind of get an idea of this process. Okay, so here's a chart of Euro-dollar daily chart. So I want to find the most recent swing extreme, high and a low that has started to retrace back the other way. So that would be this high and this low. Again, this is just a modified fib tool, and the way I do this, I erase all of the levels and start again. So 0 and 1 is your high and your low. And then if I want to see whether something is crossed over 50% mark, I would add another level at 0.5, which would then tell me that the cue points would have only been triggered here. So let's put another sort of vertical line there. Okay, so now I'm going to add the cue points. And the way I do that is again adding another level here. So 0.25 and 0.75, because you're splitting it into quartiles. So the entire move is now split into 4 equal sections. Now, your zones of interest are obviously not the middle. We've established that already. So let's delete the middle and see where the price reacted. Very interesting, isn't it? So here's a Q point, and the price reacts from a Q point straight back down. So that would be your process for finding Q points. Like, obviously you want to keep an eye out on the chart so that you don't miss the fact that the Q point has been tested. Luckily, Blatik supply demand, if you don't want to do this manually, we do have Blatik SD doing all of this for you. And with Blatik, you can press a button and you get your Q points. And if I do a back test, you will see that the Q points were created here. This is the Blatik backtest, by the way. It's an awesome feature. You can have a look at the levels and how they reacted. So going back in time, here's another one. Here's a daily Q high. And then going back here, here's a daily Q low, which is also reactive. And then you get new Q points created when this high becomes relevant, thanks to the retracement. And then you get another daily Q point, which is reactive. So as you can see, it's a much better way to look at things, because you even if you miss the first move from let's say from a supply, let's say a move has already happened, as the price is creating new highs and new lows and subsequently brand new Q points, it gives you brand new areas to work from, even if there are no good supply demand zones going forward. Because like I said in the intro, supply and demand is just like a backbone of the system. And this is why Q points are considered the missing link to supply and demand. So hopefully you're kind of getting an idea. Let's get another chart, take you through this whole process again. USD yen weekly chart. You find the high and the low, and then find the retracement. So in this case, the most obvious one is this one and that one. And obviously the retracement was made when the price dropped down, and the price moved up, hit the Q point, not the supply. This is exactly what I was saying. Made a consolidation and then dropped. So this is why it's important to know where your Q points are, as well as which supplies and demands are inside the Q points. Homework, right. Somewhere on this page, either in resources section or just below the video player, depends on where you're watching this, you will find a downloadable zip folder that's marked lesson number 3, which contains the exercises with 4 naked charts where you need to locate Q points. And again, there's another file inside named answers with the correct answers. Once you've done those, I then want you to do exactly what I've done. Just go to your charting platform and drag out as many instruments as you possibly can, and just practice, practice, practice. It's very important to immediately start putting all of this into practice. So make sure you take it slow, don't rush. So once you've done all of that practice and you're finding Q points visually with ease, then you can go and rent or even purchase the Blatik SD, which makes all of that automatic and much quicker. All right, that's it for Q points and zones of interest.